Good evening. Take a deep breath and let the world around you soften. The light has dimmed, the air feels a little cooler, and the rhythm of the day begins to slow. You've done enough for now. As you settle into your place of rest, perhaps with a blanket pulled gently over your shoulders, imagine yourself standing in a quiet field, the last glow of sunlight spilling across the horizon. The earth is calm. The wind hums softly through rows of slender stems, their petals curved like half-closed eyelids. These are poppies, delicate, luminous, and ancient. For thousands of years, they've stood here, swaying under the same stars that look down on you tonight. In this story, we'll wander gently through their history, not in haste or in judgment, but with curiosity and calm. We'll visit the temples of forgotten empires, the ships that carried their seeds across oceans, the apothecaries and poets who once whispered their praises. We'll see how a single flower could hold both remedy and risk, and how humanity learned, again and again, to listen to its quiet lessons. There will be no rush, just the steady unfolding of time, like petals in slow bloom. So close your eyes if you wish. Breathe with the rhythm of the story. Let your thoughts drift like dust in sunlight as we begin our journey through the dream flower, a gentle history of opium. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of an ancient field. The air is soft and warm, filled with the hum of unseen insects and the distant murmur of water flowing through shallow irrigation channels. The sun, a low disk of gold, lingers just above the horizon. In the fading light, thousands of small violet blooms shimmer gently, their petals thin as silk, their stems tall and proud. You reach out and brush your fingertips against one of them. The texture is cool, smooth, almost waxy. When you look closer, you notice a pale, round pod resting beneath the flower, plump and heavy, like a secret waiting to be told. This, you realize, is Papaver somniferum, the opium poppy. Its name means the sleep bringer, and for more than 5,000 years, it has whispered lullabies to humanity. It began humbly, as all stories do, in the valleys of the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization. Long before the pyramids reached toward the sky or the Parthenon gleamed in the sun, the Sumerians of Mesopotamia tended their crops along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They planted barley and wheat, dates and flax, and among them the poppy. They called it Holgil, the plant of joy. You can almost hear the rhythmic scrape of stone against clay as they recorded its name on tablets. They knew it as a medicine, a comforter of pain, a helper of dreams. Its sap, milk-white and bitter, was dried in the sun, mixed with honey or beer, and given to those who ached in body or in spirit. It soothed mothers after childbirth. It eased warriors returning from distant battles. It helped the sleepless drift into quiet. The Sumerians were among the first to record its presence, but the poppy's roots, both literal and symbolic, grew far beyond their lands. Their knowledge flowed down the Nile into Egypt, where the ancient physicians of Thebes and Memphis took it into their pharmacopoeia. In the Ebers Papyrus, a scroll of healing recipes written more than 3,500 years ago, the poppy appears again as a remedy for crying infants, for pain, and for troubled hearts. The Egyptians mixed its sap with beer and honey, creating a sweet potion that brought rest after long days beneath the desert sun. Now, imagine the scent of that ancient brew, sweet, earthy, a little bitter. The taste must have lingered on the tongue, heavy with mystery. It was not a drug then, not in the way we might think now. It was a blessing from the gods. a thread connecting the world of the living to the calm of the beyond. From the banks of the Nile, the poppy's fame followed the trade winds. Caravans carried it north and west across the warm Aegean seas. In the islands of Crete, the Minoans carved figures of their goddess with poppy crowns resting on her brow. Her eyes were closed, her hands open, serene, tranquil. To them, sleep was not just rest, it was divine communion. The poppy symbolized a bridge between day and night, between life and death, between the known and the unknowable. You might picture a priestess in that time, robed in white linen, standing in a stone courtyard lit by oil lamps. In her hands, she cradles a small bowl of poppy seeds. She whispers prayers, not for escape, but for insight, for dreams that reveal the will of the gods. For the ancients, dreams were messages, not illusions, and the poppy, gentle and unassuming, was their key to the door between worlds. As centuries passed, the knowledge of the poppy drifted like pollen across the Mediterranean. In Greece, it found a new home. The great physician Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, wrote of it calmly, describing its ability to quiet the mind, to stop a cough, to dull pain. He advised moderation, caution, and respect. Even then, people knew that too much of the sleep-bringer could lull a soul too deeply. Still, the Greeks saw beauty in its power. The goddess Demeter, patron of the harvest, was often depicted holding sheaves of wheat and poppies together, the union of nourishment and rest. When her daughter Persephone descended into the underworld, legend says Demeter wandered the earth, sleepless and sorrowful. To ease her grief, the gods offered her poppies. After she drank their essence, she finally rested. The myth was a lesson wrapped in poetry, that even the divine heart needs respite. You might notice, as you listen, that every civilization found in this small flower what it most longed for. To the Sumerians, it was joy. To the Egyptians, relief. To the Minoans, revelation. To the Greeks, rest. And so, through the ages, the poppy became both medicine and metaphor, a symbol of humanity's endless wish to soften the edges of life. Its seeds traveled farther still. Traders carried them in jars, sailors in linen sacks, farmers in their coat pockets. They grew wherever soil allowed, in valleys, near temples, along roads that stretched toward the unknown. Its pink, red, and purple petals became part of the landscape of human history, quietly blooming beside the march of progress. Now, take a deep breath. Imagine the air of those old worlds, thick with the scent of earth and incense, honey and smoke. Imagine the people who once lived among these fields, their hands rough from harvest, their eyes weary from work. For them, the poppy was not a scandal or a secret. It was a comforter, a balm, a part of daily life. In the evening, when the sky turned copper and the wind cooled, a farmer might sit by the doorway of his home and grind poppy seeds into a paste for the next day. He might hum softly, a tune learned from his father, passed down like a seed itself. The poppy had been with humankind so long that it no longer seemed foreign. It was part of the rhythm of existence, and that rhythm, like your breathing now, was gentle and continuous. Inhale the soil, the harvest, the scent of the flower. Exhale the stories, the prayers, the soft music of history. As the world turned, the poppy's story continued. Empires rose and fell, languages changed, and still the little flower bloomed wherever humans sought peace. In its sap lay a paradox, a drop of pain, a drop of peace. Yet to the ancients, it was never about addiction or excess. It was about balance, the understanding that healing is both power and responsibility. The Sumerians could not have imagined how far their plant of joy would travel, or how it would one day alter the course of nations. But for them, and for you, here, in this quiet moment, the poppy was a friend of the night. It asked for nothing but respect. It offered, in return, a soft descent into calm. The field you stand in begins to fade now. The sun slips beneath the edge of the world, leaving behind a sky painted in shades of indigo and rose. The petals of the poppies close for the evening, and their shadows lengthen across the ground. You can almost hear the slow heartbeat of time itself, the same rhythm that guided the hands of those who first named this flower the plant of joy. And as twilight deepens, you understand. This is not just the history of a plant. It is the story of humankind's desire to rest, to dream, to find stillness after the noise of day. A story that began 5 millennia ago and still continues in the quiet corners of every heart that seeks peace. Imagine walking through the marble streets of an ancient city. The air is fragrant with the scent of herbs, thyme, laurel, and a faint sweetness that lingers like a distant memory. You pass under white columns, worn smooth by time, and hear the soft echo of sandals on stone. Somewhere nearby, a healer prepares his remedies, crushed plants, oils, and a small clay jar filled with something precious, the dried sap of the poppy. This is Greece, more than 2,000 years before your own time. Here, medicine and myth are still intertwined. A physician named Hippocrates, who will one day be called the father of medicine, writes carefully on a wax tablet. He studies the body as a balance of forces, heat and cold, wet and dry. To him, the poppy is one of nature's instruments to restore harmony. He prescribes it for sleeplessness, for pain, for the uneasy mind. Use it with respect. He advises his students, for nature heals when guided with wisdom. You might picture him in his study, an oil lamp flickering beside scrolls, the soft scratching of his stylus the only sound. He measures a small portion of the poppy's powder, mixes it with wine, and notes the effect. The patient's breathing slows, the lines of discomfort ease. Sleep arrives like a tide at dusk. Outside, the fields of Greece sway in the wind. Olive trees, barley, and clusters of poppies nodding under the sun. Their petals catch the light, a crimson blush against the pale soil. Children chase one another through the fields, unaware that the flowers beneath their feet carry both comfort and power. To the Greeks, the poppy is not merely a plant. It is a symbol of both fertility and forgetfulness, of death and rebirth. When they sculpt the goddess Demeter, they place poppy crowns upon her head, for she governs the harvest and the seasons of rest. Her daughter, Persephone, too, holds the poppy, the promise of return after darkness. Even the god of dreams, Morpheus, is said to carry poppies in his hands. With a touch, he can slip any mortal into the realm of dreams. You might imagine, for a moment, what it felt like to live in that world. 1 foot in myth, 1 in medicine. Each plant, each stone, each star had meaning. When a healer crushed poppy seeds, he was not just making medicine. He was performing a sacred act, blending the physical and the divine. And so, as time moved on, the poppy's reputation grew. It crossed seas and borders, following the paths of empire. In Rome, physicians called it opium, from the Greek word opos, meaning juice. They traded it in the bustling marketplaces, alongside frankincense, cinnamon, and silks from the east. Roman doctors used it to treat soldiers returning from campaign, to ease pain, to help the sleepless rest after long marches and cold nights. Pliny the Elder, a Roman scholar with a heart curious about everything, recorded in his Natural History that the poppy draws away pain and brings about slumber. He warned, however, that too much could send a person into everlasting sleep. Even then, they understood that nature's gifts carried shadows, that comfort, when sought without measure, could turn quietly toward harm. Imagine the hum of the Roman port of Ostia. Ships creak under the weight of spices and oils, amphorae clinking softly together. Among them, small jars of opium resin pass from hand to hand, bound for the markets of Alexandria, the healing temples of Asia Minor and beyond. The Mediterranean, glittering beneath the sun, becomes a web of connection, and the poppy its secret messenger. From these coasts, the trade routes extend eastward, through Persia, where scholars of the Achaemenid Empire preserve Greek and Indian knowledge alike. Across the deserts, where caravans move slowly beneath the stars, their camels laden with silk, gems, and medicine. The poppy's journey continues toward India and eventually to the heart of China. You can picture the long line of travelers, their lamps glowing in the night like fallen constellations. They pause beside desert wells, sharing stories and teas scented with cardamom and saffron. Somewhere among their bundles lies a small pouch of dried poppy sap, precious, potent, traded for silver and salt. When they reach the next city, they exchange it for spices, or perhaps for scrolls of wisdom written in a language they cannot read. And so the flower story spreads slowly, silently, from healer to merchant, from scholar to wanderer. Each culture adopts it in its own way. In India, physicians of Ayurveda blend opium in delicate balance with herbs and minerals, believing it can restore the harmony of body and spirit. In China, the first records describe it as a medicine for the lungs and the stomach, a comfort for pain and sleeplessness. The great physician, Hua Tu, is said to have used it in anesthesia, a marvel centuries ahead of its time. Wherever it goes, it adapts. Its uses change, its meanings shift, yet it remains the same flower, quiet, beautiful, and deeply human in its contradictions. For every healer who praises it, there is a philosopher who warns against its temptations. For every comfort it gives, it asks a price, the wisdom to know when enough is enough. But here, in this gentle retelling, we dwell not on danger, but on discovery. Imagine again the calm of those ancient nights. A Chinese scholar writes by lamplight, the faint aroma of ink and smoke in the air. Outside, the city sleeps. He mixes a few drops of the poppy-s tincture into warm tea and feels the tension of the day dissolve. His hand steadies, his mind clears. He dreams not of chaos, but of harmony. Centuries separate these healers and philosophers: Sumerians, Greeks, Romans, Persians, Indians, Chinese, yet they are united by one quiet thread, the belief that nature, in her wisdom, offers remedies for all things, if only we listen gently. The poppy, in its calm persistence, became a teacher, not loud, not demanding, but patient. As you imagine these scenes, temples of marble, deserts of starlight, markets filled with voices, notice how the story of this one flower mirrors the story of humanity itself. We travel, we learn, we share. We seek balance, comfort, and peace. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we falter. Yet the search continues, age after age. The night around you deepens now. The journey of the poppy has carried us across half the world, and still it continues toward empires yet unborn and discoveries yet to come. But for now, in this quiet moment, you can rest among its petals. They whisper softly, rustling like distant rain. Sleep, and remember that all things, even the smallest seed, carry within them the power to heal, to connect, to dream. Let that thought linger as the lamps of the ancient world fade into twilight. The air grows still. The hum of trade and travel dissolves into silence. And somewhere beyond time, the poppy blooms again, a flower of memory. Its scent as old as civilization, as gentle as sleep itself. Imagine the world now, many centuries later. The air hums with sails and salt. Great ships cross the oceans, their masts tall as forests, their hulls heavy with porcelain, silk, and tea. The age of exploration has begun, and with it, a new rhythm of exchange, faster, hungrier, and more far-reaching than ever before. If you listen carefully, you can hear the sound of wooden planks groaning under the weight of empire. The poppy, once a healer's quiet companion, now begins another chapter in its long, drifting journey. It travels not in clay jars carried by scholars, but in barrels and crates marked with the seals of merchants. You find yourself standing at a port on the western coast of India. The air is warm, rich with the scent of cardamom, pepper, and sea spray. Sailors shout in a dozen languages. Traders haggle beneath fluttering awnings. Somewhere in the crowd, men in linen coats oversee a new kind of enterprise, the cultivation of poppies, not for medicine, but for trade. They work for the East India Company, that strange creature of commerce and empire, with the authority of crowns and the discipline of armies. It stretches its influence from London to Calcutta, from the Thames to the Ganges. And here, amid fields of fertile soil and golden sun, the poppy blooms again, row upon row, its pods swelling with promise. At first, it seems harmless, even noble. Farmers are paid to plant, merchants keep ledgers filled with neat numbers and stamps. Ships leave the harbors loaded with the flowers, dried resin, bound for distant shores. But the destination now is different. The ships sail east toward China. Imagine the port of Canton at dusk. Lanterns glow like fireflies along the Pearl River. The air smells of tea leaves drying in great woven baskets. In quiet corners, small gatherings form. Gentle laughter, the clink of porcelain pipes. Opium has arrived. No longer a healer's tincture, but something else, a ritual of leisure, a whisper of calm in a world growing ever busier. You step into a tea house by the river. The walls are carved with dragons, the air sweet and hazy. Men recline on bamboo couches, speaking softly of poetry, trade, and philosophy. For some, the smoke is a comfort, a moment of stillness after the noise of the day. For others, it is an escape. No one yet knows that this quiet pleasure will ripple outward, shaping the destiny of nations. The British merchants record their profits in ink and ledger. Each year, the numbers rise. Silver flows westward, opium eastward. The trade becomes a tide that cannot be easily stopped. Even the officials who frown upon it find themselves drawn into its current. Yet there are voices, gentle, thoughtful, who begin to wonder, can a thing of beauty and medicine become, through greed, a chain? Can something born from healing be twisted into harm? The questions hang in the air like incense, smoke, unanswered. In another world, far to the west, scientists and doctors continue to study the poppy's mysteries. In the quiet laboratories of Europe, apothecaries isolate new compounds from its sap: morphine, codeine, pure and potent. They name them after Morpheus, the god of dreams. They believe they have tamed the flower at last, reduced its secrets to science. Imagine a 19th century pharmacy, the shelves lined with glass bottles, the air sharp with alcohol and herbs. A doctor measures out a dose of laudanum, a tincture of opium and wine, for a patient pale with pain. He believes it will help, and it does. For a time, it soothes the body, quiets the nerves, allows sleep to return, writers to discover its strange allure. The poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge dreams of caverns measureless to man. Painters chase colors that shimmer at the edge of waking. The poppy becomes a muse, half blessing, half spell. Meanwhile, across the seas, in China, the balance begins to shift. The government, seeing the harm that excess brings, tries to forbid the import of opium, but trade, once awakened, does not sleep easily. Merchants find new routes. Smugglers find darker harbors. The empire of dreams becomes a web of quiet dependency. You can sense the tension, though we will not dwell on conflict here. It is not the roar of cannon that matters in this story, but the subtle movements beneath it, the choices, the compromises, the currents of desire and denial that shape human history. The poppy, silent and passive, is caught between worlds, between healer and profiteer, between relief and ruin. Back in India, the fields continue to bloom. Farmers rise with the dawn, their hands stained pale from the milky sap. They hum old songs as they cut the pods, the same way their ancestors once did when the flower was medicine and not empire. The rhythm of harvest is steady, almost hypnotic. To them it is work, the way of survival. They do not see the larger pattern forming beyond the horizon. As the sun sets, the fields turn gold and violet. The air is heavy with the scent of resin and earth. You can almost hear the wind whisper through the poppies, carrying with it the weight of centuries, the laughter of ancient healers, the prayers of priestesses, the murmurs of merchants counting their coins. Somewhere, a scholar in Europe writes of commerce and civilization, while a poet in China laments the fading of clarity. Both are right in their own way. The poppy has become both a bridge and a mirror, connecting distant lands while reflecting the fragile balance within every human heart. And so, the story reaches its strange zenith. The world, bound together by ships and silk, begins to dream a shared dream of ease, of wealth, of escape. The sleep-bringer has become a symbol of the times, a flower caught between hope and hunger, between light and shadow. Now, as the night deepens, imagine the ocean-wide, endless Tom. Ships drift like stars across its surface, their sails pale against the moon. In their holds, the poppy rests, dried, powdered, silent, a tiny remnant of the earth that once promised only peace. You breathe in, and for a moment, you can feel the mingled sense of faraway worlds. Cinnamon from Ceylon, tea from Canton, the faint sweetness of the poppy from Bengal. The wind carries all of it, blending the stories of countless souls into one. As the waves whisper against the hull, you understand what every traveler and trader once knew, that history is not made only by kings and wars, but by the quiet exchanges of people seeking comfort, beauty, or survival. And at the center of it all, this small, unassuming flower continues to bloom, delicate as a sigh, eternal as sleep. Rest now. The journey of the poppy will continue through turmoil, through transformation, through the long road toward understanding. But for tonight, let the sound of the sea and the rhythm of the world's breath lull you into dreams, dreams as soft and deep as the petals of the sleep-bringer itself. Imagine the world as dawn breaks after a long night. The seas are calm now, yet the echo of trade still hums beneath the surface. The great ships of empire lie at anchor, their sails folded, their decks washed clean of salt and storm. But beneath that stillness, something has changed. The dream the world once shared, the dream of comfort and endless profit, has begun to fade into uneasy waking. The flower that once brought peace has also brought dependency. In the streets of Canton, the fragrance of tea mingles with a heavier scent, sweet, smoky, and familiar. Behind the silk screens of tea houses, men recline in silence, drifting between sleep and wakefulness. What was once a gentle ritual has become a quiet habit. Outside, the empire stirs. Officials speak in measured tones of reform, of health, of sovereignty. They see that the silver once stored in treasuries now flows outward, east to west, coin by coin, carried in exchange for the poppy's resin. The balance of the world has shifted, not with war, but with smoke, and so begins a struggle, not loud or swift, but deliberate, shaped by pen and policy, by the slow recognition of what has been lost. You can imagine the emperor's court, scrolls unfurled, ministers gathered, the air heavy with incense and unease. A letter is written, addressed to the queen across the sea. It pleads not for power, but for understanding, for an end to a trade that brings both nations sorrow. But the letter, when it reaches London, is met with silence, then with ships. The world will one day call it the Opium War, though here we speak of it softly, for its echoes are not of glory but of grief. Treaties are signed, ports opened, and the old order bends beneath the weight of new demands. When the cannons fall silent, the sea returns to calm, but the quiet feels different now. In this stillness, humanity begins to look inward. Doctors, philosophers, and poets alike begin to ask a question older than empire. How can something that heals also harm? How can beauty bear such cost? Imagine London in the mid-19th century. Fog drifts through narrow streets. Gas lamps flicker like tired eyes. In small apothecaries, shelves gleam with bottles, morphine, laudanum, tincture of opium. Each one promises relief from pain, and for many it delivers. But among the grateful faces there are others, the weary, the restless, the dreamers, who return again and again, chasing sleep that no longer comes easily. Writers begin to speak of it, softly, cautiously. Thomas de Quincey writes, Confessions of an English Opium Eater, describing nights filled with strange visions, of cathedrals rising in endless light, of oceans that breathe like living things. His words are beautiful, but beneath them lies a warning that even dreams can become prisons if we do not wake. Far across the oceans, other voices rise. Missionaries, reformers, and local scholars begin to advocate for change. They speak of balance, of healing the body and the nation alike. In India, farmers plant fewer poppies and turn once more to rice and cotton. In China, new medicines are studied, herbs, tonics, practices meant to restore what was lost. A slow movement begins, not through force, but through knowledge. You can almost see it, the shift of the world's rhythm. The same trade winds that once carried opium now carry new ideas, chemistry, public health, and compassion. Hospitals replace opium dens. Doctors study addiction as illness, not sin. Governments begin to regulate, to understand. It is not an easy awakening. Every habit of the human heart resists change. But like dawn, progress comes gradually, one lighted window at a time. In Germany, a young chemist studies the structure of morphine. He learns how to purify it, how to control its strength. In France, another scientist isolates codeine, gentler, milder, more precise. The flower, once used with instinct and ritual, is now guided by science. It is as if humanity, after centuries of dreaming, has opened its eyes to see both danger and potential in equal measure. And yet, the paradox remains. Even as medicine advances, the longing for escape persists. In every age, people seek to quiet pain of the body, the mind, the heart. The poppy has simply been one mirror for that desire. You might find yourself wondering, as the evening deepens, was it the plant that changed the world, or the people who chose how to use it? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Perhaps it was simply the unfolding of the same lesson each generation must learn, that power, however gentle, must be held with wisdom. Now, imagine standing once more in a field. It is not a battlefield, nor a plantation, but something simpler, a garden of research and renewal. Rows of poppies sway under the morning light, their pods round and green. A scientist moves among them, notebook in hand. He is not seeking wealth or conquest, but understanding. He knows that within these delicate pods lies both relief for suffering and the shadow of dependence, and he seeks to separate the two. The world has changed. Empires have risen and fallen, but the flower remains, still rooted in the soil, still whispering its quiet truth, that every gift demands care, every comfort requires balance. The same petals that once crowned goddesses in ancient Greece now inspire laboratories and laws. The same sap that eased the pain of Sumerian mothers now fills syringes in hospitals, saving lives in operating rooms. The same scent that drifted through opium dens now lingers faintly in sterile corridors, beneath the steady hum of modern machines. You see, history does not erase, it transforms. What was once vice can become virtue, and what was once glory can fade into lesson. The poppy story has always been this, a mirror held up to the human soul, reflecting both our yearning for comfort and our need for control. As twilight falls, the field glows softly in the last light of day. The petals close, folding inward like hands in prayer. The air carries the faintest sweetness, neither joy nor sorrow, only stillness. The world, having awakened from its long dream, stands quietly, wiser, humbler, aware of both its mistakes and its mercy. You take a deep breath, the scent of earth, the whisper of wind, the memory of time itself, all blend together. And in that calm, you understand. The story of the poppy is not one of condemnation, nor of celebration. It is the story of balance, of learning to walk between dream and wakefulness, between the comfort we seek and the wisdom we grow into. The world, for now, rests, but the dream flower still blooms, waiting to teach again and again. The gentle art of remembering where healing truly begins. Imagine sitting beneath a quiet sky, where the air holds the faint fragrance of old soil and fading blossoms. You have followed the story of the poppy, from ancient temples to royal courts, from merchant ships to the quiet rooms of poets and patients. Now, in the hush of twilight, it is time to pause, to not merely remember, but to understand. The story of opium is, in truth, the story of humankind itself. of beauty and danger entwined like vines around the same stem. Every age has known its own version of this paradox, the gift that comforts and the comfort that controls. The poppy is only the mirror. It is our reflection that changes. Think of how often the world has turned toward something to soften pain. A cup of wine, a whispered prayer, a song in the dark. The poppy simply offered what all those gestures promised, a moment of relief from the weight of being alive. In its milky sap, ancient people found both medicine and metaphor. To the Sumerians, it was the plant of joy. To the Greeks, a symbol of sleep and renewal. To the Victorians, a remedy and a danger they barely understood. You can almost see how each civilization, in its own rhythm, reached for the same fragile balance between healing and harm, between rest and ruin. The poppy only grew where it was invited. It never demanded, it only offered. And in that offering, humanity revealed itself, our endless hunger to escape pain and our equal desire to master it. If you close your eyes, you can picture the great continuum of seekers, the healer grinding dried petals into powder, the poet writing through midnight haze, the emperor seeking to control what could not be controlled, the chemist reducing nature into molecule and measure. They are all the same dreamers, trying to name comfort, to hold it steady without being swept away. But comfort is not a fixed thing. It shifts like mist over water, always there and never graspable. The poppy's history shows us this truth in a way that feels almost tender, that every time we chase relief without reflection, the balance tips. And yet, every time we learn restraint, the world grows wiser. There is something profoundly human in this cycle, to stumble, to learn, to stumble again, and to rise differently. The poppy did not invent desire. It only made desire visible. When you think about it that way, the story ceases to be about a plant at all. It becomes about empathy, about how we meet pain, both our own and that of others. In the 19th century, addiction was not yet a word of science. It was whispered as weakness, as moral failing. But as time passed, medicine began to listen more closely to the suffering behind the silence. Doctors began to see dependence not as sin, but as signal, a message from the body and mind, both craving balance. That realization, though slow and imperfect, was the first step toward compassion. And perhaps that is the true evolution this story tells, not the march of empires or chemistry, but of understanding. For what is civilization, if not the gradual practice of empathy made visible? Imagine a scholar in a library, centuries after the wars and the trade routes have faded into memory. He turns a page, and there it is, a record of treaties, of protests, of patience and reformers. He pauses, not to judge, but to wonder. How could one flower touch so many lives, across so many ages, in so many forms? He writes in the margin, "The poppy is not villain nor saint, it is a teacher." And you, listening now, may feel that lesson stirring softly within you. It is not about right or wrong, it is about awareness. It is about recognizing that the same instinct that once led humankind to overuse also led us to cure, to research, to empathy. The same impulse that once clouded minds now opens them. There's a quiet poetry in that mistakes, when remembered gently, become wisdom. That even the shadowed corners of history can be lanterns for those who follow. The poppy, in this light, becomes something more than a symbol of sorrow. It becomes a compass, pointing always toward balance, reminding us that every gift of nature is also a test of character. You can imagine this lesson whispered across time, in the temples of Mesopotamia, in the halls of British Parliament, in the laboratories of modern pharmacology, each voice saying the same thing in its own language: use with care, heal, but do not forget what must be healed. The dream flower's story also tells us something else, something more subtle, that peace cannot be taken. It must be cultivated. That comfort without consciousness turns easily to numbness. That to rest is good, but to remain asleep is peril. Even in your own quiet moments, this truth hums softly beneath the surface. Every breath, every choice, carries a kind of dosage. Too much of anything, work, pleasure, distraction, can turn medicine into poison. The wisdom of the poppy is the wisdom of moderation, of knowing when to stop, when to breathe, when to listen. The ancient Chinese called this principle Zhang-yang, the golden mean. The Greeks called it sufrosine, self-restraint, guided by understanding. Different names, same truth, that peace is not found at the extremes, but in the gentle middle. The poppy's history teaches that lesson again and again, across centuries and seas, and perhaps that is why it has endured, not only as plant or medicine, but as metaphor, a flower that blooms in both light and shadow, reminding us that both are necessary. Now, as the night deepens and the stars appear one by one, you might find comfort in this thought. Every civilization that faced its own dependence on wealth, on power, on pleasure, eventually rediscovered humility. They learned, as we still do, that what heals must also be respected, that control without compassion is brittle, and compassion without wisdom is blind. The poppy's quiet bloom, resting beneath moonlight, holds this balance perfectly. It neither apologizes for its gift nor hides from its consequence. It simply is, and in that stillness it continues to teach, gently, patiently, endlessly. So, tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the flower closing for the night, its petals curling inward. Somewhere, in a laboratory or a field, in a memory or a poem, someone else is thinking about it too, wondering what more it has to tell us. And perhaps, like you, they'll realize that its most enduring message is not about opium at all. It is about being human, learning to live between comfort and clarity, between dream and dawn. The story of the dream flower is a story of return. Again and again, humanity comes back to the same truth. That peace, like the poppy, must be tended with both hands, gently, carefully, with understanding. And as you rest now, may you carry that quiet lesson with you, like the faint scent of the flower itself, soft, enduring, a whisper from the past that says, "Be kind with what soothes you." Imagine walking through a quiet museum at dusk. The corridors are empty, the air cool, the floor echoing softly beneath your steps. In one gallery, you pause before a small glass case. Inside it rests something ordinary, a dried poppy pod, round as the moon, pale as bone. Its label reads only a few words: Papaver somniferum, the sleep bringer. At first glance, it seems almost fragile, as though time could crush it into dust. But as you stand there, you realize this small flower has outlived empires. It has survived the fall of kingdoms, the rise of science, the transformation of medicine. It is a survivor, not of stone or iron, but of memory. The story of the poppy did not end with treaties or wars. It lingered, quietly, in hospitals and pharmacies, in research papers and whispered conversations. The opium fields that once fueled empires slowly became laboratories of learning. Morphine, once distilled from the same sap that filled the old opium pipes, became the world's standard of pain relief. It eased the suffering of soldiers, mothers, and children, a paradoxical mercy drawn from an ancient vice. In the 20th century, chemists learned to alter the molecule, to shape it into new forms. Codeine for cough, methadone for withdrawal, and later, synthetic opioids, powerful, precise, and perilous. Each new compound carried the same question that had followed humanity for millennia. How much comfort can we hold before it begins to harm us? You can imagine a doctor standing at a bedside in a dim hospital ward. He holds a syringe filled with clear liquid, a modern descendant of the same ancient sap. He presses it gently into the patient's arm, and for a moment, pain loosens its grip. Outside, the world hums with machines, with progress, with the hum of knowledge. And yet, somewhere in that act, between compassion and caution, the old story breathes again. The poppy's legacy also lingers in art. Painters once used its image to symbolize sleep, forgetting, and fragile peace. Writers wrapped its name in metaphor, a symbol of the dream that both soothes and blinds. Even in music, the rhythm of the poppy's duality remains a lullaby and a warning entwined. In many ways, you can still feel its pulse in our modern lives, though we rarely recognize it. Every time we speak of medication or of balance, or of the fine line between help and harm, we are speaking, however faintly, the language of the poppy. It whispers in our philosophies, too, the idea that every power must be met with restraint, that healing without awareness can slip into dependency. In a world that moves too fast, that consumes endlessly, the poppy's lesson feels almost prophetic. It reminds us that not all pain is meant to be erased, that sometimes the act of enduring teaches what relief alone cannot. And still, even with all we have learned, the struggle continues. In some corners of the world, the flower is still cultivated, not for medicine, but for survival. Farmers in remote valleys still score the pods by moonlight, collecting the milky tears that feed a global appetite. The trade has changed its form, but not its nature. Profit still blooms where pain does. Yet, alongside that, shadow grows another garden of research, compassion, and recovery. Modern medicine seeks balance again, returning to the flower not as commodity, but as clue. Scientists explore how to separate healing from harm, to understand dependence not as weakness, but as wound. In that sense, humanity is still in conversation with the poppy, still learning, still refining, still remembering. If you look closely, you might see the poppy, even where you least expect it, painted into a child's bedtime book, woven into the fabric of remembrance for fallen soldiers, printed on the label of a small white pill that dulls pain after surgery. Always, it stands for the same thing, a tender threshold between life's ache and life's ease. Its petals remind us of the human condition itself, delicate, luminous, and fleeting. Its sap reminds us of our endless need to soothe and to understand. And its history reminds us that wisdom is rarely born from purity, but from reflection. So when you think of the poppy now, let it not be as a symbol of destruction, nor of temptation. Think of it instead as a teacher, patient, ancient, infinitely complex. It does not scold, it simply reflects. Its story is the long mirror of our choices, our discoveries, our longing to both feel and forget. As the night deepens, Imagine once more that museum. The lights dim, and the single glass case glows faintly. The dried pod remains still, holding within it centuries of human memory. You lean closer, and for a moment you think you can almost hear it breathe, not in words, but in rhythm. The rhythm of healing, of seeking, of remembering. The flower that never slept continues to bloom in our world, not in the fields alone, but in minds, in medicine, in morality. It reminds us, quietly, that everything powerful carries a shadow, and that wisdom lies not in denial of that shadow, but in learning how to live beside it. And perhaps that is the poppy's truest legacy, not the wars it inspired, nor the pain it soothed, but the lesson it continues to whisper across centuries, that humanity, like the flower, must keep unfolding, petal by petal, toward a gentler understanding of itself. Imagine the world asleep, a slow pulse beneath a velvet sky. The moon is high, the air still, and in that stillness you find space to think. The story of the poppy has followed you through centuries of light and shadow, and now, as the journey nears its end, it asks you to turn inward, not to history, not to empire, but to the quiet space of your own reflection. Every story, if told gently enough, becomes a mirror. The tale of the poppy is no exception. It is a reflection of desire, of fragility, of kindness misused and rediscovered. It reminds us that to be human is to seek relief, to long for peace, but also to learn that peace without understanding is only another kind of sleep. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the whispers of those who came before. The ancient farmer bending to harvest resin, the healer mixing tincture in a clay bowl, the poet writing through sleepless nights, the scientist searching for balance in a glass vial, each one in their own time reaching for the same invisible thread, the line between suffering and serenity. And what about you? In your own quiet hours, have you not reached for the same thing, a way to still the noise, to find ease, to rest the restless heart? Perhaps your remedy is not the poppy's sap, but a different kind of comfort, a song, a memory, a breath. The lesson is the same. What we seek to soothe us can also shape us. The poppy's long journey reminds us of a truth so simple it is often forgotten, that comfort, like light, must be balanced with shadow. Too much light blinds, as surely as too much dark. The art is not in choosing one, but in learning how to live within both. Imagine standing once more in the field of poppies, a sea of petals, crimson and ivory beneath the dawn. The air is cool, and the wind hums softly through the stems. Each flower opens not to dominate, but to receive. They bloom, not forever, but just long enough to remind the earth of beauty. That is what the poppy teaches, to impermanence, that even peace must be renewed, tended, cared for, that healing is not a destination, but a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, rest, begin again. The ancient farmers knew this when they called the plant the joy-bringer. They did not worship its power, they honored its balance. When you think of history now, the empires, the treaties, the scholars, perhaps you can see them not as grand stories of ambition, but as the slow, collective dream of a species trying to understand itself. Every misuse of the poppy was a moment of forgetting, and every rediscovery of its goodness, a moment of remembering. The same is true for each of us. We all forget and remember in cycles what harms, what heals, what matters. The difference lies in how gently we return to awareness. In that way, the poppy's reflection becomes deeply personal. It asks, how do you treat your own pain? Do you run from it? or do you listen? Do you cover it in comfort until it sleeps, or do you hold it long enough to understand it? Pain, like the flower, carries information, a call to balance, not a punishment. To silence it completely is to silence the wisdom it brings. And yet, there is no need for guilt in seeking relief. That, too, is part of the lesson. The poppy does not judge those who used it. It only reveals their longing, the same longing that still lives in every heart that yearns for ease. When viewed with compassion, even our mistakes become teachers. The misuse of the poppy was never only a story of greed or ignorance. It was also a story of vulnerability, of people reaching for peace in a world that often hurts, that truth softens judgment and opens empathy. Imagine the faces of those long gone, the sailors, the traders, the patients, the poets. Each one, in their own way, held a fragment of the same yearning. And now, centuries later, we hold that same fragment, shaped differently, perhaps, but glowing with the same quiet need to be free of suffering. To reflect on the poppy's story, then, is to reflect on the human heart. It shows us that wisdom does not mean denying what we need, but understanding how we reach for it, with awareness, with humility, with balance. Even the flower's name, somniferum, the bringer of sleep, feels symbolic, for sleep itself is not an escape, but a renewal. It is the gentle closing of one chapter before the opening of another. Perhaps that is why this story makes such a soothing companion for the night, because, in a way, it is the same story your body tells each evening. To let go, to rest, to trust that the world will continue turning while you sleep. So, as you breathe now, slowly and easily, remember that the poppy's lesson is not about renouncing comfort, but about honoring it, using it wisely, with gratitude. The same substance that once enslaved nations now saves lives. The same symbol that once stood for escape now stands for remembrance. Transformation, the poppy reminds us, is always possible. And perhaps, as you drift toward dreams, you might carry this gentle truth with you, that every soul has its own poppy, something it turns to for peace, for quiet, for healing. The art of living well is not in never reaching for it, but in knowing when to let it go. In the soft rhythm of your breath, the poppy's story continues, not as history, not as warning, but as whisper. Be gentle with what soothes you. Be aware of what eases you. And let every comfort remind you to wake again with gratitude. Imagine, once more, the poppy field beneath the horizon's quiet gold. The wind has gentled. The petals shimmer faintly, like candle flames caught in twilight. Everything feels slower now, as if the earth itself were exhaling after a long, deep story. This is where it ends, and where it begins again. The dream flower's tale has stretched across thousands of years, from the first clay tablets of Sumer to the polished glass of modern hospitals, from ritual prayers to chemical precision. It has touched empires, shaped economies, and entered our language, our medicine, our dreams. And yet, when all the grand histories fade into silence, what remains is simple, a single flower bending toward the sun, carrying both sorrow and solace in equal measure. You can almost feel how every part of its story, the ancient and the modern, the beautiful and the broken, weaves together into something whole. The poppy's journey was never only about trade or conquest, never only about science or sin. It was about us, about the way humanity learns, forgets, and learns again. If you listen closely, history speaks like the sea, not in crashes, but in waves. each crest a moment of discovery, each trough a pause for reflection. The opium fields, the apothecaries, the reforms and revolutions, they were all waves in the same tide. And just like the tide, they always return to balance. In that balance lies the heart of the story. The poppy teaches that no gift is pure, but every gift can be used wisely. It reminds us that comfort is not weakness, that healing is not indulgence, but that both require awareness. It whispers that empathy is the greatest antidote of all. Imagine sitting at the edge of that same field, now quiet and silvered by moonlight. The air hums softly, the night creatures stir. Somewhere nearby, a small stream glimmers, carrying the reflection of the stars. Each droplet of water, like each petal of the poppy, tells the same truth, that life is always a mixture of sweetness and ache, of shadow and light. Perhaps that is why the poppy still holds such power in our imagination. It is not only a plant, it is a reminder that beauty and danger often share the same stem, that what heals can also harm, and that wisdom lies not in denial, but in understanding. Think of all the lives it has touched. The patient who sleeps peacefully after days of pain. The poet who dreams in metaphors of smoke and color. The farmer who tends the soil in the hope of a harvest that sustains his family. The scientist who studies its chemistry, seeking to preserve its mercy and limit its shadow. Each one, in their own way, continues the conversation. Humanity began with this flower long ago. The world has learned much from that conversation. We've learned that healing is a dialogue between body and mind, between past and present. We've learned that knowledge without empathy becomes control, and empathy without discipline becomes chaos. We've learned that the line between medicine and poison is as fine as the edge of a petal. And in all this learning, perhaps we have begun to understand something deeper, that the poppy's story is not about escaping pain, but about meeting it gently, to sit beside it, to breathe through it, to understand that even sorrow can be softened by patience. As you think of this now, imagine the flower closing for the night, its petals fold inward, not in defeat, but in rest. The air around it stills, carrying the faint sweetness of earth and sleep. In that silence, you can almost hear what the ancients must have felt, a quiet reverence for something greater than knowledge, a trust that nature, in all her mystery, offers what is needed if only we listen carefully. So, what remains after the long journey of the dream flower? Perhaps it is gratitude for the way it helped humanity grow, stumble and grow again. Perhaps it is humility, the kind that comes from realizing how easily power can slip into harm. Or perhaps it is simply awareness, a gentle readiness to see complexity where we once saw only simplicity. History does not end, it changes shape. The same flower that once inspired myths now inspires medicine. The same symbol that once divided nations now unites scientists, healers, and teachers. The dream flower continues to bloom, not only in soil, but in thought, and its fragrance, though faint, still drifts through our collective memory, reminding us to move slowly, to act wisely, to heal with care. As the night deepens, you might sense that this story, though finished, will never truly end. It will continue each time someone reaches for healing. Each time compassion meets knowledge. Each time a single act of awareness interrupts a long cycle of harm. The dream flower rests, but it never sleeps completely. It waits, like memory itself, to be rediscovered by anyone willing to listen. And now, As you breathe in the last words of its story, feel the calm it offers. Not the days of forgetting, but the peace of understanding. The wind sighs softly through the petals, carrying a single truth across the centuries. All healing begins with awareness. All awareness begins with gentleness. So rest now. The story of the poppy, the dream flower, the sleep bringer is complete. It will stay with you quietly, like the faint scent of memory at the edge of dreams. And as the world slowly drifts into its own deep sleep, the flower, somewhere, blooms again, reminding all who come after that even the most complicated histories can end at last in grace. And now the story drifts to its end. The petals of the poppy have folded for the night. Empires have risen and fallen. Ships have come and gone, but the flower remains quiet, patient, eternal. It reminds us of the strange, tender balance of being human, how we seek comfort, even as we reach for wisdom, how we stumble, yet continue to learn, and how, through all the noise of centuries, we return again to the simplest truth, that healing begins not with power, but with peace. You've listened to the story of the dream flower, a tale of beauty and complexity, of comfort and caution. Let it rest with you now, like a gentle fragrance that lingers after dusk. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the poppy fields once more, their silver leaves whispering softly under the moon. The air is cool, the stars kind. Somewhere in the distance, time exhales, and the world, for a moment, is completely at rest. So let go. Let history fade into quiet dreams. You are safe here, in the stillness between one breath and the next. Good night, traveler of time. May your sleep be deep and your dreams kind. The dream flower will keep watch until morning.